time is 4:03 PM, March 4th, 2025. I call to order this Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting. We'll begin with a moment of silence. Mr. Root, would you lead us in invocation?
Yes, pray with me if you'd like to. Father, you've given us a lot of guidance and really underscore the importance of being good stewards. Stewards of the gifts you've given us, and especially good stewards of things you've entrusted to us that are yours, the earth and the income of others that counsel us to steward. Please just give guidance. It's very important. We know this, and we just pray for your wisdom because of the import of it, your guidance, and just your farsightedness. In your name I pray. Amen.
Mr. Miles, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure will.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have approval for the May 7th, 2024 regular minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion second. Any discussion or changes? Hearing none, all in favor?
It is 5-0.
Next, we have discussion regarding strategic planning meeting follow-up and prioritization. Ms. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting. In front of you, you have a report that looks similar to this. They all kind of look the same after a while, but this one's short. And as the follow-up to our previous meeting, you do have a long sheet here that at the strategic planning meeting, it was requested that we have a 3-year transactional history for in and out of county stone sales from the quarry. And that is pretty telling there because the revenues are remaining the same, but it looks like the quantities have decreased just a bit. Again, we have not implemented for 1 year. That 1 year mark is in August of 2025, and we'll continue to collect data to show the improvements there. So on your other report, the one that looks like most reports, these are the objectives set by council as priorities during last week's strategic planning retreat held at Tri-County Tech last Wednesday morning. As you all know, you were in agreement for one of the very first times in history for the Tier 1 priorities. The Tier 1 priorities, as you see here, are numbered. They are not in a priority order. I put them numbered so that when you decide to put them in a priority order, it can be stated by number, and it would be easier for us to track for priority purposes, both in manpower, staff, think tank time, and funding. If you want me to, I wouldn't mind quickly going through these just to make sure everyone has an understanding of what's on the list. If I talk too fast, someone give me the eye. Cost of living increase, again, these were all 5. Everything on the first part of this report were all 5 council members in agreement with prioritizing these. So the implementation of a cost of living adjustment of 2.25%, which would be consistent with the state of South Carolina, for all county staff and elected officials exempting council. For an implementation date for the first pay period in October would be an estimated $565,000. The timeline, of course, would be immediate upon implementation. Golden Corner Commerce Park industry occupant, of course, the timeline is unknown, and at this time, there is no known cost for that. The efforts required to do that is to continue working strategically with our partners for economic development. We did have interest in the park a couple of weeks ago, and that interest this past Friday announced that they were not constructing anything anywhere. So we didn't lose to another site. They're in a holding pattern, I believe, until some of the federal confusion over tariffs is cleared up. Number 3, maintain momentum on Exit 4 sewer expansion. Mr. Hart, I do not have an update this week on that. I am anticipating hearing back from DES any day now on that. Again, that cost estimate was $3.1 to $3.5 million. That entails extending a sewer line from the Golden Corner Commerce Park pump station to the Exit 4 properties.
And that bidding process would be 30 to 45 days with a construction estimation from our engineering firm for 6 to 8 months, depending on supply chain. Implementation of county paving crew. This is the one I believe that we should do a 2-year priority on, simply because hiring people and getting them trained and buying equipment all at one time would be difficult for the current staff I have at the road department. So in addition to the current patching crew, we would add an entire paving crew. This could be completed by spring or summer of 2026. But if you look down at the bottom, the equipment is 2.9. Now, the roads and bridges and the road maintenance, and bridge and culvert fund do have fund balances in them that could be allocated to this. But again, I believe adding the staff, getting everyone trained, and then doing the equipment purchases would be the best way to go on that. So we're looking at a possibility of having a county road paving crew in the 26-27 budget year. The increase for quarry production, stabilizing stockpiles. There are a couple strategies that I worked with Tom and Billy through this, the director and assistant director at the Story, that we need to determine a metric of what the quarry product and expectation for quarry sales is. And I say that simply because if it's to sell all the products we have, then we can't make stockpile. If it's to sell 250,000 tons or 25 truckloads, then that's a measurable that can be met. Now, that doesn't have to happen in one day, obviously, but without knowing what a metric is, like when is it on a scale for us to say, okay, we've sold enough for today, now we need to start crushing. 2 is to investigate the permitting costs required for a second cone, crusher, and belt for specific stone types. This one I'm going to emphasize to the point that if we had a second crusher, cone, and belts, one, it gives us 2 plants. It wouldn't be 2 full plants because of the spatial limitation of where the plant sits itself. But it would allow for there to be the operation of 2 plants, which means when one plant is down, another plant's running. Maintenance on one plant, running the other. Option 3 would be to increase equipment rental budget. We are currently 5 pieces of equipment down at the quarry. Getting parts for some of our pieces of equipment have been proving to be more and more difficult. So increasing the equipment rental budget puts more equipment in the quarry for us to maintain operations and not having 3 people working on equipment. Typically, we have 2 mechanics who work on the large equipment. With that many pieces down, we have to get them fixed because the plant can't run without being fed. 4 is to develop a land acquisition plan for our future quarry needs. So that investigation period is currently underway with Tom and Billy. They have brought in the services of Goldie and Associates. I will be meeting with them throughout the course of the next 2 weeks so we can bring what that looks like back to council for a potential executive session discussion on that. The land acquisition cost is unknown. Equipment for the second cone and crusher and belt would be somewhere between $4 and $5 million. And the recurring costs of staff would be $334. Again, you are running 2 simultaneous operations with the potential of running overtime and weekend periods. Develop of a capital improvement plan. You'll see an asterisk there. That asterisk indicates all the items below that would fall under the implementation of that plan. And obviously, we didn't discuss this at strategic plan, but it tells me you are already in planning for a better future for Oconee County. Because if you'll see, the implementation of the capital improvement plan would be utilizing county staff to do a county inventory of current county-owned facilities and come up with a maintenance plan for all of the county-owned facilities moving forward, in addition to using population growth estimates for where services may need to be expanded and or relocated and expanded. One of the instances there would be, say, a landlocked convenience center. If it's already out of room now, we know in 15 years it's still going to be out of room. The timeline for that would be 18 to 24 months, and at this time, other than staff time, there is no associated cost. Please excuse me, I'm still got a yucky throat. Number 7 is one of the first items that would come under the development of the capital improvement plan. Although they can run concurrently, I don't want y'all to think that none of the other items can be done without the capital improvement plan being completed. It is the removal of the documents from the former health department building here on Booker Drive. We can utilize county staff again. We have worked with Department of Archives. I recently just got information back from Department of Archives. If, for those of you who have been there, you know how much paper's over there. It would be a time-consuming process, but it can be done. We can rent mobile storage units, which means we would only be handling the items one time to move them out, bring them here for the evaluation, and as we have time to work on them, we can work through those documents. Not everything in the storage facility must be kept. There are some things that are kept simply for historical records, which is great. But what I'd really like to do is bring in staff during off-season or off-times when some offices aren't quite as busy as they normally are, and let's start scanning those documents so that we have an electronic copy without having the need to store so many paper copies of everything that we have. The cost, this is a shot in the dark because I don't know how long we'd have to rent the storage units. I put $25,000. Simply because that's 6 months. If it takes us longer than 6 months, then we need matches. Just kidding. Just kidding. If the county resources are the only ones that would be responsible for this priority, I would recommend that we allow volunteer staff to work weekends, which would cost a little bit additional in overtime. Sewer plant planning for Southern Oconee. We would utilize information and data that already exist in conjunction with the future population expansion to identify a potential location for a sewer facility located in the Fairplay area, simultaneously working with the sewer authority, increasing their capacity and what that may look like with the county being a partner in that. That timeline is 3 to 5 years. The cost is $20 million per million gallons per day, which is our regional average. That cost obviously is going to increase as time goes on. That's just how cruel the world is. I think the due diligence time would be the first part of that, would be for us to have that property identification and or identify ways that we can partner with the sewer authority for that expansion. In the event that our population estimates are correct, and we are looking at doubling population in 20 years or increasing our population by 50% in 25 years, a secondary plant may be the wisest option there. If I'm going too fast, please speak. The expansion of fire and emergency services and the reimplementation of local training options. My strategy here would be for us to start developing regional stations in the county's primary quadrants that are future focused. We've had a discussion in the past regarding the construction of a potential new station somewhere near and outside of the Seneca city limits to help Crossroads Friendship area fire. That would be the pattern. It was up to develop stations that can be accessed. Several districts can be accessed from one regionalized station. We would need to add staff for those. We could implement in the 26-27 budget year, and station construction, equipment, and apparatus, $3.4 million. Staffing, $637,850, and that's pretty mirroring what we have currently at Downeyland. We're almost done with Tier 1. Solid waste planning, transfer station, landfill, and recycling centers. So one would be to fund the equipment needs for effective and efficient operations. The relocation of the haul road at the landfill is currently under engineering and permitting, and the relocation of the wall, the dumping wall at the C&D landfill, is currently being worked on as well. So those we've got underway as we speak. The idea about us maintaining a future outlook on how to manage solid waste is we're gonna have to at some point look at the potential possibility of having to build a transfer station, because we are currently capping our DHEC limits pretty much 3 days a week out of the 6 days we run. The timeline for that, again, is ongoing. The landfill capital equipment needs, Swain estimated at $3.3 million. Transfer station construction, I really guessed at this, pulled some cost estimates from neighboring counties that were 500 tons a day or so, which is where we would aim to be. Right at $4.5 to $5 million. All my estimates are on the high end, by the way. The good thing about the transfer station, when and if the time comes that we do have to construct a new transfer station, is that we wouldn't have to shut ours down. We have enough property located at the solid waste complex for us to build a transfer station in a different area of the complex while maintaining use of this one. We wouldn't be allowed to use both of them, and I don't know that we would be able to staff running two transfer stations, because I don't know that we would want to have the container underneath that catches the liquids. I don't know that we would want to maintain two of those at one time and have to do the testing necessary for that to happen. Again, that's more of a long range, 3 to 5 years, but it is something that will have to be addressed over the next period of time. Pine Street security. I did proceed as discussed with council members because of the risk and because of the nature of this discussion. On the front side of that, considering the number of people that do attend council meetings, and because the number of entrances and exits that can happen, I'd like your permission, not necessarily right this second, but we do have some immediate implementations that we can do, like we do for voter security. We have more law enforcement here. We have hand wand scanners that we could use. This would not be an infringement on citizens. We could do limited access doors just to help control. Okay, let's say it right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entrances.
6.
Right here. So those are immediate with very little cost impact. On the flip side of that, I don't know if you've seen our new signages out here, big, bright, shiny numbers so everybody knows where they are. And the other side of that too is to continue the Sheriff's Office Safety Implementation Plan. This will be the second year. Again, I don't want to go through the specifics of this because I don't want it to be a compromising piece of information for anyone that has ill will, but there have been several measures taken. One of the things I did not include in that though is the improvement of camera activity in here, like the addition of maybe 2 extra cameras that point that way. So in the event that we would need to go back and view that for any reason, we would have that documented. That concludes your tier 1, which is the most tier 1s I've ever seen. But I also think it's great because all of the things with the star tells me you're not looking at today and tomorrow. You're looking at next year, you're looking at the rest of this year, and that's a real testament to council and your commitment to the future. So if we want to do an exercise, they're numbered now, but they are not in any particular order. If I can get a top 5 out of this, it would be fantastic.
Okay, I wanna talk, and this ain't necessarily in order, I just put asterisks by things I think we're gonna have to start addressing because it's common, solid waste planning. I mean, the county's growing, we're gonna need to make sure we address solid waste. I put an asterisk by Pine Street security, and there's some of those measures that's not necessarily cost and tied, as Mr. Put a star as far as expansion or fire and emergency services, and more or less of that is, hey, maybe we need a station next year, but it's, what I really like to see is the plan developed of where we know we need to be going. So as far as this year budgetary costs, I don't know that it's impactful, but as far as we could have a cohesive plan, so we can plan long-term. Because we have an opportunity to do that now. I also put an asterisk for cost of living, employee wages. And everything I say, I wanna do without a tax increase. So that's my priority, but if we don't keep up with cost of living, then we're gonna slowly slip back to where we was. That's 4, but, and obviously the Golden Corner and the exit 4, that is, we're already doing that.
We are already doing that, and of course, I don't know that there's any more effort that Mr. Gilbert can give in trying to
Right.
recruit those.
He's-
As we all know, as we hit the spring months, it's gonna get busier. everybody, I think, is ready to see that flagship industry at Golden Corner. I know we all are. And I know the town of or the village of Fairplay is as well. So I think some of these take a fall in line in the priority, but if there was one specific or two specific, I wanted to make sure that we captured those and when we're working on the budget and our planning moving forward. So all of these will remain a priority.
Yeah. As far as like, I see budgetary concerns, I think one thing we need, that would be impactful this year is the cost of living raises, if we can work that in. It's hard to pick, we all agree on so many priorities, you know, like,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
can I interrupt?
yes, sir.
So the removal of the documents from the former health department, if we do like the short-term rentals, it's low cost, but I think it has a high impact, at least on the Walhalla area.
Right.
And also, I think if Ms. Brockett, we don't already have a record retention policy, we need to have one.
With the state has one that we adopted, yes, sir.
Does it have a destroy date? Because what I learned in business is it's just important to retain as to destroy. There
Yes.
should be a destroy date, and we need to follow that, because apparently we're not following.
No, sir, we have not. The primary reason, and I'm not making excuses, I just want to offer this just for information purposes. The primary reason is when probate moved to this building, there were records in there. Then one of the storage rooms that's 2 doors down from where probate is now was a storage room. Well, it's connected to the outside, and we had consistent water leaks in there. All the water lines in this building are either under the building, under this portion of the building, or and go that way across that building. We gotta do something now, and we never actually made a plan and completed it. So I think giving us the opportunity to create this plan and work forward would be really good for all the departments involved. And whatever gentlemen are gonna be assigned to this task, I would like, to buy them a pizza at the end.
But here again, the destroy date.
Yes.
Each department, every year, should be held responsible, for going and pulling their records that need to be destroyed that year.
Absolutely, they should. And it would be so much more efficient if we had that opportunity to do it here. Having off-site destroy date, outside itemized some time.
So you got to catch up. And
Yes.
you gotta maintain.
Well, that's it. This is a front-loaded project, and you're exactly right. Once we get caught up, I believe it will be a lot more advantageous for all of us to maintain. You know, it's almost like letting your grass grow too high and you're choking out your lawnmower the first time you cut it.
And I don't know how long Clemson Rural Health is gonna keep wanting to do what they wanna do, so I wanna get them to do it as soon as possible, so that somehow or other, that their money doesn't dry up or whatever happens.
So speaking of Clemson Rural Health, their lease is up for, potential renewal now, few months? Couple of months? I don't have the date right in front of me, forgive me for not having that. I do believe, though, it might be worth council's while and the county's while to say, hey, if the county's gonna put this time and effort into removing all these documents and creating a whole new storage system based on the fact that we're moving all these documents, that we get a written guarantee from Clemson Rural Health that their expansion is forthcoming.
Yeah, I think we need a guarantee from them before we go start doing this.
I think we can work through that. Dr. Gimbel is very easy to work with.
You was talking about using county staff in off times or weekends or whatever. Is it possible for the sheriff's department to use trustees?
If there are trustees available, yes, sir. I have not checked on the availability of trustees in a while. The last time I checked, there weren't any available for the work that I requested. But if they're available, absolutely, yes.
So we really hadn't set priorities. So on these, Ms. Brock, on these first 11, which ones will be capital intensive for this fiscal year?
I'm just reading. I didn't fall asleep on you. Okay, for one thing, we know that we have funds in current budget year that we can roll to next budget year for some Pine Street security implementations. And we have some really low-hanging fruit with the items that I gave you a few minutes ago. those things, I mean, I believe, and I hope that I'm correct in believing this, that for the things that cannot be quote-unquote started and finished in a set period of time, that we continue to make recognizable and distinguishable progress on these things going forward. So when we get to the point where we're like, okay, now we're ready to invest this capital, all the hard work and due diligence and thinking has been done already. So just from my perspective, your Pine Street security, I have funding in current year budget that I can roll over for next year for the low-hanging fruit, and we have budgeted items for the remainder of the few things that I talked to y'all about. New signage was one of those, and it's already up and out front. Your solid waste planning, utilizing the capital equipment and vehicle fund, work with Swain to identify which one of those is a priority. Potentially even engage with a planning expert or an engineering firm for us to do a site location so we can begin the due diligence for a future transfer station replacement.
And like, I would like, 3, 4, 5 year, I know once you get beyond 5, it gets hard, but we got some stability so we can know it, hey, if we're setting millage aside, what we're setting aside for.
The increasing a quarry product and the stabilization for stockpiles, I believe that that's a priority for each one of you. I want to address that one separately because that one doesn't touch the millage necessarily. Now, we do a transfer in from the rock quarry every single year equivalent to 1.2 mils, which is about $750,000 currently. I think that we could go ahead and start working on what that looks like.
Okay.
Putting it on paper, because that doesn't involve tax dollars. Quarry is an enterprise fund. Simultaneously working on that land acquisition plan and what it's gonna look like to get that second crusher, cone, and belt in. The quicker we get the second cone, crusher, and belt in, the quicker we can start running more than one piece of equipment at a time. And we may not be running both pieces at the same time on a Tuesday afternoon, but it does provide the availability for staff that want to make extra overtime to come in on Saturday and Sunday and runs 57, so we got a stockpile Monday morning and everybody's coming in the gate. I think that is a priority that we could work on. Now, this will not be completed by June 30th for current calendar year, but I do believe we'll have strides made. Billy and Tom did a phenomenal job in doing some background research for me. One of the things that they brought to me that we discussed and I voted down was to bring in a second crew. Well, if you bring in a second crew, you're still working on the same plant, which means if a belt's out, the second crew can't work anyway. I believe having two plants running, I don't think a full plant, because we don't run out of every product every day. Primarily, it's 57 and right now riprap. But bringing in that second cone and requiring fewer staff to run that second cone, and that way, the 18 people who are currently working on the primary cone can work on the other cone if they decide to work on weekends, or if we decide, hey, we want to let everybody work 4 10s and run 7 days a week. There are options there that would not be available to us if we simply just got a second crew.
Okay.
The development of a capital improvement plan, that one I believe we just need to start. I met with our facilities maintenance director in discussing this. After he got over the shock and awe of what I told him I wanted to do, he did remember our former facilities maintenance director, Lake Julian, and they have a pretty good catalog of information. I haven't looked at it yet, so I don't know what's in it. And then years ago, the county did an entire project assessment of all county-owned properties. So I think we could start combining some of the information we already have on hand and then put the boots on the ground and say, okay, now we need to do building assessments. I think that is just gonna be a living, breathing, plan that we can work through going forward. Is James in here? Hi. What you doing the next 6 months? I just think that's one of those things that it's such a tool for us to have a full assessment of everything we own and what the maintenance requirements are gonna be in the next couple years. I mean, we know now that we funded last year partial funding for a sheriff's office roof. We know that sheriff's office roof has to be replaced this year, but we didn't know that 5 years ago. And it would have been nice to know you have a $2 million expense coming up in 3 to 5 years.
Well, in some, like, once you start looking at solid waste, then you're already working on the capital improvement.
Correct. It's kind of the same thing, which is why I thought when I was putting these together in the way that I did, everything that has an asterisk does kind of fall under that. But all of these things can run parallel. So for you, you're looking at pure capital up front, solid waste first, your quarry products, your county paving and, road crew. That one can be done by the transferring or utilization of the current road maintenance millage. Now, you know, we built up a fund balance over the course of 3 years that went out to the current contract that we're in, which is working fine for the current contract that we're in. But for us to be able to build up that balance, for us to do those equipment purchases and add those staff in once we get everybody trained and ready to go. Maintaining the momentum for exit 4, of course, we are receiving, actually, we just got another one not this past Friday, but Friday before. We have the partnership, remember, with Rural Development Authority. So I deposited $600,000 not this past Friday, Friday before, from the Rural Development Authority. So we have funds to start working once we get all the documents back from DHEC and the operation and maintenance agreement from the Sewer Authority. Golden Corner Commerce Park, again, not a huge investment. It is a huge investment, actually. I'll take that back. But it's an investment you've already made. You got the rainbow shining, now you just gotta go find your pot of gold.
And one thing I'd like for us to maybe look at is, and discuss maybe with Jamie too, does it help us to make the entrance look nicer?
Yes,
With a
it
nicer
would.
sign? you
Yes,
know?
it would.
I mean, does that help sell it? I mean, I know it does in traditional real estate.
Yes, there's a little bit of lack of curb appeal. I'll give you that. There's a little bit of a lack of curb appeal.
Are you sure that's gonna be your main entrance?
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
that's
sir.
what you know.
No,
I
sir.
know They had it designed with 2 entrances.
You're right. And currently there are
Years
3.
ago.
That's right. Currently there are 3 encroachments off of 59.
At least like a
The
nice
original
sign.
one that we paved that has the cul-de-sac, but you know, we paved that one, with C-Fund money as well. And at that time, we had to have a paved access area where we come in and then the, sewer road goes down to the right and the Blue Ridge easement, of course. But the northern entrance, it has no curb appeal.
Yeah. Something,
None.
a nice sign versus, last time I was down there, that sign looked pitiful if it's still standing.
We hope it's not.
So,
I think that's one of the things that would be well spent, just simply out of the economic development, professional funding that they have in a fund account now. As small of an impact of cost as a sign may be. I don't mean stones, bricks, yeah, I don't mean all that, but just a nice, simple sign, I think would be a vast improvement.
yeah, I think so too.
I tell you what, that spot would be good for. Now, you'd probably get a lot of pushback from the neighbors. That spot would be really good for a racetrack.
That's a very expensive 42-acre pad site
talking
for a
about-
racetrack.
Not just 42 acres.
No, that's the part we graded,
Right,
yeah.
but what's left? I mean, just where it's at.
Yeah, I had someone tell me this morning when I went to go speak to a group that, they thought that would be a great place for Buc-ee's. Yeah,
Again,
someone
yes,
this
it
morning told me
would.
they would like to have a Buc-ee's there.
I work with some racers, and they travel all over the country racing, and I see all the racetracks are getting closed down.
I'm talking about an asphalted racetrack like Anderson Speedway or something like that. But you probably wouldn't get the buy-in from the residents down here.
Mr. Hart, will you take a poll?
Yeah, I knew that. In fact, on the poll, I'll have to add this to it. Y'all might have seen the news that there's $100 billion that's gonna be used for, creating chips that's coming to the United States.
Oh, my. That might be a good one. Mr. Mice, might have to put the building in the middle.
Okay.
They can just race around the
Well,
perimeter.
see, they could use those chips to put them in the cars to see if the computers are working.
Okay, a race car testing facility. I like it.
So again, that's 2 and 3 were already marching that way.
Mhm.
Maybe we can do some things like a sign, some things like that, but
There are a lot of things that will have slow and steady progress. I just wanna know which ones we wanna push the gas on. I think Mr. Elliott's point of making an immediate impact for low-hanging fruit cost-wise, the vacancy of the upstairs at the DHEC facility, and us getting that documentation back from Clemson Rural Health that that is their intent, and they'll guarantee that intent. Sewer plant planning, of course. I don't see any of these that are strategically out of reach. I just want to make sure if there was one thing on the top of anyone's list that you all agreed on, that we were addressing it appropriately.
what do y'all think?
I've got cost of living marked. Of course, I marked the, maintain momentum on exit 4 sewer, which we're basically working on that now. Increase quarry production. And that Pine Street security. And trying to get our solid waste planning strategy for, future growth here in the county. You know, that one worries me, solid waste planning. I don't think we got a good grasp. I know we have trouble with equipment. There's tons and tons of stuff coming in, and we struggle with that. We struggle with quarry production. And
I mean, if you wanna say something to hit the gas on, the more rock we can produce and sell, the more that funds other things you
That's
wanna
right.
do.
It does. We just have to look at the depletion rate. So if we increase production by 30%, we are taking a year off of the quarry every 6 months.
and that's where,
And we're not in a state of panic, so I don't want that to be misunderstood in any way, but we're currently ahead of our depletion rate as it is. So I do believe that production of more, which is why I recommended us doing that second plant. And it gives us the opportunity, if one's down, we have another one to go to. But parallel, we need to start looking at that property acquisition and what that's gonna look like. Mr. Mize, the solid waste, I appreciate that a lot. You all inherited, you know, whatever you inherited, I'm not gonna blame anyone who sat in any chair in this building at any time. But solid waste is one of those things, it's almost like, your septic or sewer at home. It's not a problem until you notice it's a problem. It's just one of those strange things, cause it's, you know, you put something in the trash, you take the trash out, the trash can goes away in a truck, and
you're happy.
yeah, it's out of sight, out of mind in a lot of ways. But the equipment needs, really, a priority needs to be put on those, so I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the amount of time you spent after the last two law enforcement committee meetings ago, talking through and understanding what that looks like. And not that anyone doesn't understand, but the complexities of solid waste are gonna ever increase as the number of things being produced become more complicated. Like, nobody knows what's inside of this, you know, the different kinds of chemicals or batteries that's included in that. So there'll be more regulatory stuff coming, and I think it's important that we maintain every effort that we can to take care of those things in as far as
What
advances.
bothers me about it, it's not the quarry, it's not the solid waste. It's not their problem, but I ride by it every day, over there where I'm at. There's houses going up every day, and they got the big dumpster sitting out there. And it's anything and everything goes in that dumpster, nothing gets segregated, and then it goes to the landfill.
Yes, sir.
And to
Now, the good
me,
news is the Pickens landfill did just reopen. You know, they were closed for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, so they have reopened. That may cut down on some of the waste that we're looking at coming into the landfill from the Pickens County side, but it won't cut down on any of the, projects at Clemson coming in, because we're just so much closer.
I wish the developers had segregated into wood and in other things. The wood could be shredded and not go in the landfill. We just don't have a good grasp on that.
So I met with Pickens County, about a year ago, and Pickens isn't perfect, they have their own issues. But I think they're trying to alleviate their issues, have some valid things maybe we should look at. Like, they pretty much grind everything, and they can lay out the stats for you, on the compaction ratio they get by grinding it. And their guy said, he says they spent this much money, the machine paid for itself in X amount of time. I think it may be worthwhile for us to take a law enforcement public health committee field trip to Pickens County to see their operation of their landfill and what they're running, and let him show us those statistics. We can bring him here, or we could go there and see it firsthand, but to see what they're doing and the kind of return that he got. He said whatever machine they bought, it paid for itself in X number of months, and then they bought another one. He talked about their compaction ratio, how much more time they're getting out of the landfill now that they got it back running. But they have a whole other set of issues that we don't have, but they're not necessarily the people there's now at fault. They're just trying to deal with it best they can.
Exactly.
And they may have some ideas that can help us.
I'm sure they do,
Falling behind.
and doing that is gonna cut down on the destruction of your equipment. If it's already ground up,
That's what we talked about too, the wear and tear on
wear and tear on the
equipment.
equipment.
You are dead right.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're interested, we could take a field trip.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I talked to him about a year ago, and I mentioned that to him. He said, yeah, come over, we'll get on a bus and ride around and see how they do things.
They have a bus? I didn't put that in the plan, but may I?
Let's don't get a bus
Tour
for.
bus.
For landfill
Actually, I do
tours.
have a bus. We have an airport shuttle bus. We can take an airport shuttle bus.
We just fly over.
Okay.
Yeah, there
Well,
airport's close
airport,
by
we
to
got
it.
one.
Yeah.
I don't fly, Glenn.
You just jump out of planes, you don't land them.
Oh, Lord.
I'm not a very good flyer.
So with that, if it's okay with y'all, I feel like I have enough direction to formulate this and renumber everything. The renumbered one, I'm gonna put draft as, watermark on the current one. I'll renumber. We'll talk about it'll be April. I'm gonna bring it back. What I'll end up doing is emailing it to you. And if any one of you singularly doesn't think my order is correct on what we put the gas to the pedal on, I'll make that correction and send it back out. I'd like for us to get started prior to the next council meeting, which is not until April 1st. So with that, we're gonna move on to the tier 2. There were only 4 tier 2s. Again, these are things that are, staff heavy, not capital heavy. The alignment of chapter 32, 38, look at ordinance revisions, especially those that get consistent BZA approvals or any conflicting languages. Working through the ordinance language in a routine and regular basis to resolve any conflicting information between those two. Planning staff and planning commission, last night just discussed the retaining walls within setback. So that will be a systematic thing that goes forward, just as natural progression and steps. There can be some additional staff time allocated to that, additional shelter, spatial needs, improvement of animal control response. Identify the spatial limitations caused at the animal shelter as it exists today. There are a couple of things that I learned since strategic planning meeting, that we do have a written agreement with the Humane Society, and there are times where the Humane Society utilizes additional kennels on the county's agreed upon side if there is a significant influx of animals, which could limit the space available for animal control to bring in animals. The city of Seneca is talking about doing some temporary, from what I understood, temporary type kennel structure. Don't know the exact location of that, but I met with the Humane Society. I don't know when that was. But I think there's a way for us to come to an agreement and identify a potential location on the current Humane Society site for one of the smaller units, such as the one that the city of Seneca was looking at. At this time, I do not have a cost estimate for that because I have no idea what the smaller kennel facility looks like. I did not have enough experience and expertise on my own to pull those documents. And the ones that I could find online, I don't think is what we're looking for. These are truly like mobile, like almost on a trailer. And I don't think that would be a good long-term solution for what we're looking at. I think the primary solution of what we need to be identifying just right off the bat is for that use of space and agreed upon space inside the facility as it currently exists. The Oconee Regional Airport hangar construction. Without going too far into this one, Mr. Elliott, I did receive a thumbs up that that is a possibility on the potential site that we had discussed. Once I get enough information to where I'm comfortable with the information I have to share, to get direction from you, of course, we'll be bringing that back to you. With the current cost and estimate, and this includes due diligence and grading, $4.5 million for a set of T-hangers. I do not have the number of T-hangers that would be available on the site that was identified. Once I have that information, I'll bring back to you.
So when you say T-hangers, are those the ones that are open air?
No, sir. No, sir. So T-hangers are built in a way so one plane goes in this way and one plane goes in that way. So essentially, you're just trying to utilize less footprint space for more available hangar space. Former Fair Play School demolition, identification of potential grant funding for the demolition. The timeline would be ongoing, and at this time, the cost is unknown. I believe I brought forth a potential for the reallocation of ARPA funds, if that would ever be considered by council. I did not include that on this report because that action would be contingent upon favorable outcome from the lawsuit. And when that time comes, that discussion will be put back on the table as a consideration.
So as far as like the tier 2 priorities, if things play out, that way, I like to put a priority on the Fair Play School, just for the fact we're investing a lot in that area, for its infrastructure, but no ARPA funds that went there, but what we're investing in change that community. I hope for the betterment, but with that being said, I'd like to give a piece back to that community too by helping remove that block right in the middle.
And it's dead center.
Yeah.
I mean, you come in on 243, you see it. You come in on 59, you see, I mean, it's dead center. Yeah.
And I think we want to do it Golden Corner and stuff like that. I think that visual effect, plays a part.
And I think that, talking even about the signage, I mean, you're sending a message.
Right.
I mean, truly, you're just sending a message that we're taking care of this particular area in the county where we've placed this priority investment.
Especially when you have a former government building sitting now it wasn't a government building, but it's still sitting there dilapidated.
And then finally, on to the Tier 3 priority initiatives. Mr. James, I believe this was yours, the municipal/county recreation discussion. I put on here because this was not a priority of 3 or more, that it wouldn't receive priority. If this discussion is something we want to bring back up, or if there's more information that you believe would be beneficial for me to help you come up with a plan for that, happy to do it. But because it was only 2, it really didn't make the priority list.
So, when it got brought up, I kind of shot it down pretty hard. I would be open to increasing funding to the rec departments if we could include, maybe in a budget proviso, maybe a David Root question, that for this funding and the county funding that goes to county rec departments and county kids, that there be a provision in there that they all agree to work together and play together, not this dividing lines, I know that's been a sensitive subject in the past, but I think,
I'm not aware of it.
I hope by this point people moved on. And you allocate county tax dollars, it should stay in the county. One group shouldn't have to leave the county to go play. And the other teams should keep those parents in the county to come spend gas money and eat. Is that a avenue we could do?
Coming up with the language would be tricky. Getting everyone to play well together would be much trickier. I'm not from here, just have been in rec sports for forever, and I know how they work and was around the last time we went through this. But yes, can it be done?
Yeah, I would like, and I'm not opposed to increasing the funding if we can come up with that language to say, hey, we're one county, let's work together on this. Or y'all, anybody against that?
Am I understanding it's a boundary issue?
It's a boundary issue.
Boundary
And I
issues.
think they gotta work together to agree.
So somebody has to concede for a loss of boundary or shared boundary, if I remember right?
I think it's sort of like, for lack of better words, it's like a turf war. That's what it is. And
The children in the south, part of Oconee County, if they, go to the Fair Play Rec, they're sort of limited, they can't play, they having to go to Georgia or into another county to
I
find
remember.
somebody to play.
So there's different leagues, and I don't understand it, you know, but I know the Fair Oak needs a boundary for the elementary school territory is what they're
From
asking for.
Westminster, if I remember right?
That's right.
Okay, so that's how it came up and I figured it. But I was at a lot of the recreational task force meetings, 2016, 17, somewhere in there. For whatever reason, because it kind of died down, I assume it had been resolved. So I do know a little more than what I reported on my document, because I didn't realize it was the same issue.
Yeah, so, and it's funny, you know, we increased funding by $30,000, 3 years ago? And I don't know what increased funding looks like. I'm not, I mean, rec ball, I mean, it's an avenue for a lot of kids and families, and I believe it's welfare of the community, right? You know, you grow up responsible adults, and a lot of kids learn more there than they do in the classroom. So I'm not against, I know it's pretty hard line, I'm not against increasing the funding, but I like to make it to where the adults can be an example for the children, and let's take the funding, let's build together.
So since we're moving the budget along, can I ask that instead of it being a proviso to be approved in the same exact process of the budget, in case that process is not running parallel with our budget, that we do it as, I put the funding in with a contingency upon agreement being made? So if we're running Play Nice together along at the same time, and their timeline doesn't line up with our budget timeline, one of the two things doesn't fit the other. Is that making sense?
Yeah, and how you have measurables here of what Play Nice looks like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you gotta have some kind of measurables
I agree.
to say you're not doing right. You know, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know who to ask, cause I don't know enough about that to say.
What about withholding funds? If they can't,
That's a possibility.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
So I
that's
think
what we do,
essentially
but
what
we
we
just
could
gotta
do
know
is
what
put the
that
additional
looks
funds
like.
in the council's budget, and the council approve that allocation once the agreement has been made. So keep the 30,000 per district in the
I think it's
PRT
50
fund.
now.
Yeah, increase it 30, I'm sorry, to keep the 50, and then put that additional fund in the council budget. And when you all know and you're comfortable with the agreement being made, then, okay, allocate the fund.
make it a condition.
But I honestly think going forward that all of the funding ought to be tied. I mean, if you just, you know, if you're just casting your neighbor out and county tax money is going to help fund your rec department, it's not right, honestly. I just don't know how we come up with measurables to say you are playing fair. And I don't wanna go down that rabbit hole of a task force, you know. But if somebody would,
So we need a sport court.
like, could it be something that, and I don't wanna throw him under the bus, but if we had some type of measurables, like somebody like Phil could look at each year and say, hey, they're working through this, and if he sees an issue, he can just bring it forward to council.
So it puts Phil in a position, because Phil has been put in that position before.
Okay,
So
Didn't know that.
Phil was part of the discussion in the round table on how this was going in the first place. I think your measurable is that every district has a person that tells you it's working pretty well. I don't think there is a measurable out there to address each and every one of the items that may become or be an issue. I think each one of you hears from your district and that representative and says, we're doing well.
now I think part of it is they do have to have a boundary, that's step one. And that may come from Westminster and Seneca, I don't know how the rec boundaries overlay,
I don't either.
you know.
I have Scott and his athletic director about it, at least for the Seneca district. I don't know about Herb over in Westminster, but there needs to be a collaboration between all athletic directors and the administrators of the cities that's gonna cooperate. And they need to collaborate and say, we're gonna let the kids play and let's get the grown-ups out of the way.
Well, this,
So, Mr. Chair, we saying that we're gonna tie it to the 50,000 that's there, we're gonna allocate
I would
more
like,
money?
I'm okay with allocating more, but I like to tie it all together.
So we need to go back and get and talk to the people in each individual district and see where they're at.
Yeah.
Which was my recommendation of,
Because rec sports, I've been involved in youth sports for a lot of years now, and it's, high school level, rec level, through wrestling, club level and stuff like that. It is a benefit, I've seen, I could name off tons of kids that would have never graduated high school if it hadn't been for wrestling and these other sports. So it's a benefit to the entire county. But, so anything we can do to figure out a way to help that, I think would be a good thing for everybody in the county. Not to mention, like you said, funds staying in the county and
Well, and
just the revenue.
I've heard some people say that Allen County kids puts a burden on their rec department. So if you give up some boundary to, say, Fair Oak, then they take that burden away by having those kids. And I think kids play wherever they're gonna play anyway. I don't think they deny. It all comes down to the boundary to playing each other in like all-stars, right? It's almost as confusing as the fire service.
It is.
I'm not beyond what Glenn said, though. If they can't agree, then we withhold the funds from them.
Because we're giving the county taxpayer funds to benefit the whole county.
That's
So if a
correct.
portion of the county's getting cast aside, then that's not benefiting the county. And then those kids are going to Livonia.
I just recall, if I could, Mr. Chairman, when we did it back when, we got the first layer of the onion was, I think it was just boundaries for softball, which had a different governing organization. And then, once we peeled that back, like, we could fix this if we could get some concession from municipality A and work with this group. But then the layers started unfolding, when we had this issue under that was a problem, this issue under that was a problem, and then it brought in volleyball. There's a whole myriad, just amalgamation, just a problem of issues. That's why I think just going to each one to figure out what the issues are currently, hopefully they're not as convoluted as they were back then, because I don't know if you're gonna get to distinct measurable.
I think the start is boundaries, and if they just, play together some, it may not make sense for Salem and Fair Oak to play, right? And they can be mutually understanding of that. But, and that's all, I know Wahala's all new people since then, rec department, council. The only person here, it was you, right, when that happened, was you on council then? So there's been a lot of turnover in people and personalities, so.
and historically, I believe the only issue was Fair Oak and Westminster. I don't remember Seneca having an issue at the time. It doesn't mean they didn't. I'm relying 100% on memory.
They had issues back in the nineties, because I was the president of the Townville Rec Department and had to go up there and try to negotiate with Seneca so that Townville could play some of the Seneca teams. It's
But
just,
that's been resolved?
no, we got it resolved then, but, of course, I don't know what they're doing now,
Well, then maybe Seneca is involved.
so.
And I don't remember if it's a boundary issue for Seneca. I do remember it being for Westminster and Fair Oak.
So I'm in favor of increasing that funding. I'm in favor of tying all the funding to cooperation. And I think we just need to go talk to our respective districts and see where they are. And they may say, hey, I don't wanna cooperate, I don't want the $50,000+. And that'd be their,
So in that case, what I'll do is I'll put the 50 in the regular budget like normal. And the additional funds, again, put back in the council's budget.
right.
That way, I just don't want, if their timeline is delayed, I don't want our timeline to be delayed. 'Cause we have our timeline established for first, second, third reading. Again, I do believe there's language that can be formulated, because Mr. Root's a genius. You're welcome. But the metrics may be hard to meet. Again, I mean, you're representing constituents that you have conversations with, and it's important for everyone to hear. Yes, it's going pretty well. I don't think you're ever gonna get a checklist that you can check off and everything's okay on that checklist. That's not a practical approach in real life. But I think as long as your departments and your cities, municipalities, and districts are like, yeah, it's working pretty good. I mean, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Anybody have objection to that?
Matt, did we agree on a additional amount?
If you wouldn't mind, I would like to bring back some options for that. As we work through the budget process, there's some caveats that may be involved in that. If some of them have larger percentages for outside of city or outside of county, not county, outside of district. I think in some ways though, each city has its own set of expenses, building maintenance, costs, teams, that sort of thing. I'd like to pull some of their budgets and see what they have in there, just to make sure when you're doing an increase, it's gonna be impactful. I mean, you can't give someone $5 and tell them go get on a plane. You know what I mean? We need to make sure that any additional monies that are allocated will be truly impactful. And we can study their budgets to show what that impact might look like.
Okay. Do we have anything else?
That concludes this
All right.
on my end.
Anybody have anything else?
I got one question. I'd like to go back to the tier 1 stuff, number 8. How's the current restructuring of the OJSRA
So
going?
our next ad hoc committee meeting, actually I did a conference call yesterday as we start looking for that. I believe there are discussions on possible legislative language adjustments that allow for X number of changes to be made on this OJRSA board. There is a board feasibility reorganization structure ad hoc committee that I do serve on. We meet once a month. The legislative changes were the first thing that had to be addressed. Mr. Root was kind enough to join me at the last two meetings ago. Last meeting was like 2 weeks ago. For us to talk through as a panel what those legislative changes may be, because authorities have legislative language that prohibit or promote certain types of board activity. It will be a long process. At the time of the last meeting, there was a request for an extension of the finalized plan to be submitted to RIA. As you know, the reorganization ad hoc committee, we're all working under the auspice of a grant now. It's going smoothly. There are a lot of people at the table. So as you can imagine, they're long meetings full of detail, but it's going smoothly. Whether the state authorizes and approves that extension for the deadline on the RIA grant, I have not heard as of today, but I'm going to anticipate that they're going to approve the request for the extension on the RIA grant, because the RIA grant period would have to take into consideration the language for the legislative changes that would be necessary for the restructuring reorganization.
One more thing, if you could bring it to council, it's outside the general fund mostly, somebody's general fund, so we don't see a whole lot of it. But like the Visit Oconee stuff, I'd like to know exactly where that money's going, like where is it advertising, what's it targeting?
Sure.
Who's it targeting?
Along with what he just said, I thought we were going to, actually ask for a budget from all these people that were using our property.
Yes, we do get an audit and an annual audit from people that utilize our property. Currently, we're doing evaluations on insurance policies for people that are leasing our properties. Yes.
Okay.
Now, I don't know that we're gonna see a budget in the way that we see our budgets, because, I'm gonna pick 102 Laura Lane, for instance. It's a division of a larger entity, so their budget is incorporated into a larger one. So if you saw their whole budget, you would say, my goodness, this is a multi-million-dollar. But this is just one satellite branch of that division. So what we're doing is just making sure every agency has a clean audit and an up-to-date W-9.
Another thing, I like to see like some financials and what it's achieved, the business incubator. Can't think of the name of it, but
I really think that would be a great annual presentation. I mean, we've got small business incubator 3 blocks from here. It would be really cool to see what those business, like, just do a business highlight even, you know.
kind of aware are they now too?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Chairman, the farm seller, I'd like to see their budget. 'Cause don't we fund some of their budget?
No, sir, we don't.
We're in the past, man.
No, sir, we didn't.
I was about to the tune of $1.5 million that we've given them that may not be considered budget.
So we got, this past budget, we didn't include.
No, sir.
Okay.
We have had restrictions on their use or things they had to do to have the lower than fair market value lease rate. Maybe that was part of it.
The one thing we did, Mr. Elliott, is I did put up some fencing out there a couple years ago. There was an incident. I don't remember if it was a rodeo or the fair. I don't remember which one, but one of our traffic control units, it had to be the fair for it to be traffic control, so it must not have been a rodeo, had suggested that we put some fencing up, because after the events are over, when cars are coming and going from the entrance and exit of the facility, where people had parked across 123, they could easily just walk directly across the street and there not be having anybody for traffic control or safety. Anybody wearing dark colors at night, it just, reduction of risk when I put the fencing up at the front. But no funding, no direct funding for their budgetary purposes.
Anybody have anything else? I hear none, have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second, all in favor?